Totally, yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you speak?
Hi.
Hi. Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. I can hear you. Okay, we're all good. We did a configure switch, so that's why. All right. We're all set. Ooh.
Just quick thing, are we asking POIs through chat or by like holding our hands up here?
If you want to state your preference before your speech, that'd be great. So I usually prefer verbal POIs because people don't always watch the camera, but you can do what you prefer. Just like say what you want. So we'll get started. You guys are all set with the 5-minute prep time? I'm curious.
Wait, are we agreeing now? Are we agreeing now, or are we gonna agree? You can say before your speech.
Just before your speech, if you want to specify, that'd be awesome. All right, and we'll just do a round of feedback afterwards. So if you want to get started, Prime Minister, go ahead.
Thank you. Dear Honorable Speaker, in this speech, I'm going to be explaining what it means to read each other's minds, and I'm going to be bringing 2 points of my own. So first, so everyone can see what everyone thinks, and there's no filter on what thought you could see. So you could see anything that anyone is thinking, even if they're not true. So my first point is it's a violation of privacy, because if you think about it, thoughts are just you could think of whatever you want, but you cannot control it. So it's a huge problem if what you're thinking about just suddenly filters out and everyone can see what you're thinking about. So for example, if you have a code to your phone and you're thinking about it right now and people can see it, well then after that it anyone could steal your phone, or they could just take and use it and take all your personal information. My second point is that thoughts are impossible to control. So it would be hard to to know what are the true thoughts that they're gonna actually use, or the thoughts that just come into your mind and go out and you don't even know about it. So for example, if you are just thinking like you're just walking down a road and you think, oh, I'm going to cross the road and I'm going to just walk and sit on the road and wait for a car to run over me.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Is it not true that if these people can read minds, they can probably choose what part of the mind they want to read and what information they want to ascertain?
No, in fact, they just read everything that you're thinking out loud, and so they have no choice. They have no way to define if that thought that's going through your head is true or not. So I'm going to continue with my second point. And so it's like thoughts are so hard to control. Well, in that case, you could just think of something that might be bad, it might be an awful thing. And so if people see what you're thinking, there will be like it could happen. They could just call the police. They could just, if it's like a friend, for example, they'll just not be friends with you anymore and start staying away from you. And so there are so many possibilities that could happen. Yes.
If they're thinking of something bad, isn't it good for other people to read their minds and make sure they're not going to do something to harm themselves?
No, because most of the time, I believe that truly almost every single thought that goes through my mind, I do not actually like go through with the plan I'm thinking about. And because after all, a thought is, as it says, just you thinking about it, but you're not actually gonna go through with it. And so, as I said, it is really just an awful way of, um, just thinking about, well, of controlling someone and of simply just knowing everything about them. And so, with that, I proudly oppose.
Teal.
Oh, sure, why not?
POI. So, is it not true that in 2012, the United States government looked through, until 2012, when WikiLeaks exposed it, the United States government would look through every single private server email to confirm there was no terrorist actions? How is that any different from someone who can read minds looking through terrorist minds to make sure that there are no terrorist-related actions against any single nation?
I think that, yeah, it's true that like terrorism is a serious case, and reading people's minds would be very helpful in case of terrorism. But at the same time, there are so few terrorists in the world, and they would just go through, they would just violate the privacy of every single person in the world to find that those 1,000 out of 7.8 billion people in the world. I just don't think it's worth it. And so with that, I probably oppose.
All right, I thank the Prime Minister for the remarks, and I call upon the Leader of the Opposition to open up the opposition case. Hear, hear.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right now, I'll be telling you why us on side opposition have definitely won this debate, and why this should absolutely be used in so that this would be used by everybody. Okay, first thing I want to say that most people won't use this for little things like thinking of what you're gonna do or whatever. People are gonna use this for big things and things that are necessary. Like if this would be used in the government, people will be specially trained by the government to use this in special scenarios, just like interrogations. And this will help a lot because most people in interrogations are all sweating and everything, so they will be a little bit nervous, so that will help even more. Okay, furthermore, okay, the leader of Prime Minister has been talking about how this is an evasion of privacy, but I don't think so, because let's go back to, what was it, 2017, when Tom Brady, look at that Deflategate scandal of Tom Brady. Okay, the NFL had permission to look at through all of his messages to the Patriots organization and to NFL people. And this is going to be this is the exact same as this, because because if you're saying that that's an invasion of privacy and the people are actually using it, well, then why shouldn't this so then why is this no different? So, and that's why I think that we should absolutely be using this, and it will help us a lot. It will help us a lot because one, it's not an invasion of privacy, because if people need to use this and the government is especially trained to use it, it won't be invasion of privacy, because the government is the one that is controlling this, and the government is the one that's gonna allow this, and it will help the government. Yes.
Would you not agree that governments are still restrained by laws regarding the invasion of privacy, and that it was highly contested and considered significantly almost scandalous when it was revealed that the US government was reading private information? Is that not still an invasion of privacy for the US government to do that, even if they did do it technically legally under their own law?
Well, let's say this. This is as well an invasion of privacy, but it isn't as bad as what happened earlier. This is still an invasion of privacy, but I think that helping a government and helping people find out things is more important, and it outweighs and it will outweighs all those rules and everything like that. Because the government, one, they need to know. Two, it will help people, and it will help special trained soldiers. And three, government absolutely needs it, because this will help them in many cases, like if they go interrogate a terrorist or something like that, so they will know what happened and what's going to happen. And this is very much a good thing, because the terrorists will because they'll know when the terrorists will attack, because terrorists will be thinking about that. And two, it will save people's lives by using that, and I think that saving people's lives outweighs all of these laws about privacy. Thank you.
All right, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for their remarks, and I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the government case. Hear, hear.
Thank you. So in my speech, I'll explain why our side has won this debate by rebuilding a few of the speaker before me's points, the Prime Minister, and also making a few of my own. All right, so in this situation, so some of the statements made by the leader of the opposition were that that governments could use these measures and use mind reading techniques in order to help control terrorism, in order to help them maintain security for people. However, I think there are a couple of problems with this analysis and how it functions. First of all, I'd like to address the comparison that's been consistently made between reading private emails sent over servers and reading minds. So whereas reading a private email is still reading the filtered communication of one person with another who they have decided to send to that other person, reading someone's mind is reading their thoughts unsolicited, and they have absolutely no say in the matter. So because of that, it's significantly different. Even over email, you generally not email your deepest thoughts and most profound fears to any person. So I don't think that's really a valid case to compare those points. I don't think that's valid. Second of all, I think that despite reading minds having the potential to save some lives, there are also a lot of lives that could potentially be lost, because trusting governments with the ability to read minds and root out any person who may disagree with them seems very dangerous for the long-term stability of the country, and also for anyone who disagrees with the government and their potential safety. If the government had the ability to read minds and look for people who disagreed with them, it could result in a pretty nightmarish scenario where governments could utilize mind reading, people trained in mind reading, in order to root out people who they believe are conspiring against them and even purge them, which could result in a much bigger loss of life. And the third point I'd like to make is that even without loss of life, there are also a lot of potential severe issues with this. So if people could read minds of others, they may run into things like traumatic thoughts of other people, and run into a lot of really damaging thoughts within other people's minds, which could, first of all, have an impact on their mental health and on their sanity. And second of all, yeah, I'll take your POI.
Okay, you have been talking about how the government should not be using this, but I think they should absolutely be using this, because as you have said, it might help, it might save some lives. I think that those lives actually matter, because most governments have a very qualified leader that will use this very will use this very usefully, and I think that this will be an amazing thing.
To address that point, we believe that government's ability to save lives with this, the number of lives lost to terrorism and conspiracies against people and stuff like that, is very low on the worldwide scale. There are tons of other things that cause way more deaths than that. And domestic violence by governments against their own populations has caused far more deaths than terrorism for pretty much history. So because of that, it's been a severe, like it's not in the interest of governments in order to try to deal with terrorism as a way of saving lives when their own tyranny could potentially cause more deaths. I'll take your POI as well.
Thank you. My comment was, I understand the speaker's fear, but I'd like to inform the speaker that me and the opposition agree that there must be a line. We thought that the line for reading minds must either be for murderers or for terrorists in an attempt to secure national security. I don't think that this should be used in any attempt to score governmental points or to gain up on political battles. And actually, you're the government. I guess I wouldn't assume that you wouldn't be trying to score political points for yourself.
So to address that, I think that trusting a government, what is defined as terrorism is entirely dependent on what the government classifies as terrorism. In many cases, it doesn't have a clear definition. So I think that restricting it to people who are practicing terrorism against the government is a dangerous definition, because that can be defined in many different ways based on what the government would like. So to move on to my final point, before I conclude my speech, I think that the people who will experience traumatic thoughts will, in the end, have significant loss of individuality and loss of consistency through, and they'll become very consistent between each other, since if they're reading people's minds, they'll be picking up on their thoughts and molding themselves to those thoughts. So because of that, I think it'll cause severe damage to the individuality of personalities and of the population who's doing this mind reading. So in the end, I think that overall, this leads to a pretty bleak society. And I think that, and that's why I'm strong to oppose. Thank you.
thank the Deputy Prime Minister for their remarks, and I call upon the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Here, here. Do you guys prefer if I keep my audio on for the claps? Does that matter to you or no?
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay.
May it be known, I would prefer POIs in the chat, so that's possible. Thank you. Today I will be bringing up one point, and then I will be talking about some refutation against the previous speaker and the Prime Minister. The point I'd like to bring up is the point of habeas corpus. It is known that in a time when terrorist actions or actions of violence against a nation happen, it can be used that a government can impose habeas corpus to restore public order and to arrest enemies of a country. This same example can be used in this situation. If we apply this argument, we can see that even though it might impale on some personal liberties, if it is in the intent of restoring order and creating a system removing terrorism, it is no different, and it is actually in the protection of national security and a protection of personal liberties. Thank you. I'll take the POI. I can't hear you. Could you please type me the POI in the chat? Thank you. I'll continue on and when you're ready.
Your audio is just glitchy. That's all.
I'd like to discuss the first point made by the Prime Minister, which is privacy. Well, as I've said previously, in an attempt to protect security and in an attempt to stop violence against the nation, we can restrict privacy. And really, on this privacy argument, these technology companies such as Facebook, Instagram, they're taking classified information every day, and people don't seem to have a problem with this. This idea that the government is going to steal people's information is absurd. The truth is the government is going to use this information for good, to catch terrorists, to stop attacks against a union. If you do want to continue to attack this country, I understand that you would want to fail this. But if you want to help protect and restore a nation and to stop an attack against a union, I would highly recommend supporting this motion because it will save lives instead of killing them. Also, on the argument of lives lost because of removal of the idea that it will remove someone's livelihood, we can talk about the idea of how it can actually be useful in that field. We spoke in the opposition about health and psychology, about how this could be used for a doctor to get into their patient's minds to understand how they can truly help them move on from grief, depression, anxiety. This could be breakthrough to help millions of people suffering from mental illness. And I think based on all these arguments, the government argument behind not stopping terrorist attacks and not stopping murderers, thinking that we are going to use it to attack a union has no validity, and therefore I am proud to oppose.
I'm just gonna run through this just for the footage. Sorry, this is not actually a thing. I'm just doing this just so you can get good pictures. All right. Almost there. Then we're done. Okay. All right. All right. I thank the member for their remarks, and I call upon the Prime Minister to deliver a refutation speech. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I'll be saying why we, as the opposition, have made the better argument in this debate. For one, we want to use this mind control for good. We've made points. We want to stop terrorists and murderers. And I think that outweighs the privacy concerns that the government has made. I think they are saying they can control the population. But in a country like Canada or the United States, I really doubt that would happen, especially since we are such a democratic and fairly left-leaning country, especially in Canada. So, as well, the government has made points about how it would create a weak society because we'd all be hearing each other's minds and make us sad, and we'd hear thoughts we may not want to hear but I think that makes us a more connected society if we all know what we're all going through. And I think that if doctors and psychologists are able to help us better because they know what's happening inside. There's no POIs in the reply speech. I already asked that. Sorry.
Sorry, I forgot format.
So I think that we can have a way more connected society that way. Yes, and I think we made a good point about how Facebook, Instagram uses every single day to take our information, and so does Google. So I don't think that mind control for using it to protect us against terrorists and murderers is not that different. If you want to talk about privacy concerns, think about affecting companies like Facebook and Instagram before you take on this mind control. So I think that today, us as the opposition, we made a good point about how we should be using mind control for the greater good of society. Thank you.
All right, I call upon the Prime Minister to close off the round. Here.
We cannot hear you. You're cut out.
Are you good, or are you having issues there? You have to put it in chat. Are you able to do it without is it your headphones that are the issue?
Hey, is it working now?
Yeah, it is.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
To finalize our thoughts, we believe the risk to privacy, the risk of government persecution, and the difficulty to control this power outweigh the benefits of it. Many of the government's arguments were directly against privacy. They also used false points, such as the fact that social media companies monitoring what you tweet and what you look at is equivalent to this. That is false, because you have a license agreement when you sign up for those platforms that allows them to do so. You sign away your right for privacy through what you look at on those platforms. The government's arguments are directly against privacy. Our side believes in privacy of thought and privacy of the mind because this is the most important thing. We believe we should not sacrifice the privacy of everybody, and a lot of the times the safety of everybody, because if everybody can see your minds, it is an extreme issue to safety to save a few lives from terrorism.
All right, let's do a little applause for everyone. Let's shake the hands. Oh yeah, there we go. Awesome. Okay, sweet. So I'm gonna give some quick feedback. We're running 5 minutes until we're closing off, right? 5 minutes? Yeah. So I'll do some quick feedback.
Can you do feedback over to the machine?
Yeah, I can do. I'm gonna switch to machines. I'll be right back. All right, we're doing a little camera switch here. All right, perfect. So we're gonna go. I have some broad stuff before we go into the individual. I thought this round was really good. I really enjoyed seeing a bunch the arguments on privacy were really interesting. So what my biggest probably concern about the round, so where I thought a lot of the content went was, instead of it being more focused, if we read the motion again, which is you have the power to read minds, this house would never use it. I think we need to focus more on that aspect, right? If you're the individual, what does that look like for you? So I think we got some of that with some of the arguments coming out of just the first few speeches. But later, as we progressed through the round, we got more and more focused on this issue of governments using it for privacy, against terrorism, all those things. So rather than it being about individual who's having this one particular action, it was focused more on their role as like their relationship to the government and what they're going to do there. It's unclear whether or not there's more than one person who can read minds. It's unclear the influences will have. So I thought it was rather confusing at times, and it wasn't necessarily focused on the motion as much as I would like it to be. But that's just how the round went. So it's not like it's fine. Just be mindful in future of what the motion is and where it's focused. Okay, so with that in mind, I want to go. Yeah, you have a question, Leader of the Opposition?
Yeah, I have a question about
Oh,
that.
wait, 1 second, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead now.
Yeah. Would that be how does the opposition solve that though if the government doesn't clearly outline maybe that? Is it our job to put it back into the perspective, or do we?
I believe you can just say, oh, the government is off topic. This is what the argument is about.
Yeah, so that's something we call reframing the debate. So it's all about positioning your arguments in a way that's going to recenter it. So you can change how the debate is going by saying, this is not what this debate's really about. We're still going to refute it. We'll still talk about it, but the most important material is the stuff about the individual. Does that make sense? Yeah. So with that in mind, we're going to go into speaker by speaker. So we'll start with the Prime Minister. I was really impressed with the road mapping right off the bat. Had some good content there. You talked about the violation of privacy right from the beginning. And I think this is the argument that kind of pushed it into the surveillance kind of theme. But I think in the way that like I envision the round anyway, this is probably a prominent theme. More specifically though, I'd like to see more on when you violate the privacy, what does that do to you as an individual who can read minds? Like, what kind of thoughts are you reading? If you go like walking in the street or you're talking with your friends and you can read all of their thoughts, like what impact does that have on your social life, in your social interactions? Are you becoming more self-conscious, becoming more nervous because you know exactly what everyone's saying about you? Maybe it's not great things, right? And that can probably lead to some mental health impacts. So that definitely could have been expanded. You do talk about the damage to relationships a little bit, but I want more of a mechanism there. Tell me why that damage occurs and tell me the impact of that. Especially where it's at this house as this individual, you really need to go in on what the individual aspects are. I thought it was really strong nonetheless, so I was really impressed. Talk about how it's an awful way of controlling someone, and you tell me about how there's so few terrorists, like violating their privacy is like not as important as like, or violating privacy is worse in comparison.
You can put yourself off of the thing and take
Okay, moving to Leader of the Opposition. I like this speech too. You talk about how you can have selective mind reading. I'm not really sure if this is what this means. So you talk about how there's special training by the government, all these things. This is kind of where I think the round begins to shift focus and move away from the individual into this kind of weird surveillance theme, which is great content for a round that's more focused on surveillance, but I don't know if this was the case here. So if we talk about privacy, it's not an invasion of privacy. You do the government comparison, which I think is pretty strong. So I'll consider it from now on as like, if the round was a surveillance one, because that's kind of where the round went. I'll judge it as how it went. So talk about how you're helping the government with it. Talk about how the government's still bound by law. So there's not going to be like an awful amount of mind reading. There's still going to be some amount of restrictions, which I think is a necessary distinction to make, that there's not going to be like super immoral acts being committed. I thought this was interesting. Won't be used for bad things. I just want more of a mechanism on why this is guaranteed, right? Because I think we get some really great examples out of the government on why like these abuses can happen and it's open to happen. So I just want more analysis on why necessarily this won't happen. You can even talk about if you're that individual, maybe you're bound by a moral code. You don't want to do this because it might hurt like people you love, or it might be against your ideals, that sort of stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah, but you had good reputation. I thought it was like really strong overall. Deputy Prime Minister, talk about how you're using mind reading techniques to ensure security, or about how that's maybe bad. There's a danger for political liberties. I think this is a good speech. You talked to me about how when we use it for surveillance, not all governments are like good actors, right? They're not all angel actors. They don't always have the best interests of people in mind, especially when you move out of Canada and you're going into like countries that aren't democratic, or countries that have like a shaky democracy, where there might be a desire to undermine that. So I think that that's something that's really interesting to bring up, and you do some good refutation there on telling you why this doesn't necessarily exist in a country that's like altruistic. So this was really interesting. You talk about the traumatic thoughts. This is probably my favorite content in the round. You tell me about how if you read into someone's mind and there's bad things in their head, that's going to hurt your own mental health, which I think is a really important point. And it kind of wraps the debate back to what I thought it should be about. Talk about how there's impact on self-insanity. You also tell me why terrorism is not necessarily a big threat, and the cons of invading people's privacy generally is probably worse. Loss of individuality, thought that could have been expanded on. Constructive was really strong in this speech, thought there was some good refutation, did some good criticism of kind of ops whole model of working with the government to do this. Okay, does that make sense too?
Yep, I ran really hard out of time because I spent too long on the POIs, so I couldn't explain my mechanism. That's my fault.
I'd recommend if you could just taking one and giving one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so deputy leader, habeas corpus. Honestly, I can tell you I didn't know what that meant before the speech. Like I've heard that term, but I was really impressed with like the specific knowledge you had here. Infringing on personal safety for national security. I think this is pretty interesting. I just need more of an outline on why there's a necessary threat. Like I want to know about the magnitude of this like supposed terrorism. If it's going to be the main line of your case, you need to tell me whether there's a present need for it compared to like, is there an immediate threat to lives? Like you play this thread out quite a bit, but I just want more justification for why this is A, going to solve it, and B, why it's as bad as infringing on civil liberties, right? Especially if we're focusing the debate in a surveillance lens, for sure. Your reputation is interesting. You do the first weighing in the round, which I think is really great, or not the first weighing, but you start to do more weighing, which is I think is really great. Especially in the deputy speeches, like it's a good thing to see that you're already trying to frame debates in the second speech because you're trying to win on the characterization that your partner provides. So that was really super. How you're using your powers for good. Government argument has, yeah, my writing gets messy at this point, but really strong speech. I like the weighing, some pretty good constructive based around some like specific knowledge. So I was really impressed by that. So well done. Okay, into the reply speeches, and then I'll let you guys go. So for the Prime Minister's reply, or sorry, Leader of the Opposition's reply, you talked about how you can stop terror. This is unlikely to happen in Canada, that there's going to be abuses. I don't necessarily know if I buy this. I need more reasons why. You can talk about how there's a democratic like system that holds people accountable. Just more of a mechanism, I think, is more necessary, and that's not necessarily something you can do in the reply speech. So your partners probably would have had to do that earlier on for it to make a huge difference this late in the round. But nonetheless, I liked your point. You talked about how Facebook already does it, how there's already systems in place that violate privacy and security. This is kind of refuted by saying that there's like a contract that you sign, but nonetheless, I thought it was interesting. You talk about how these abuses are already occurring, and this is probably a more accurate way of doing it. I don't necessarily know if I buy into this as much as like the case wants me to, but I did like the weighing and I did like this comparison. I thought it was a pretty apt one. Okay, so for the Prime Minister's reply, then we're all finished. You do a lot of weighing in this speech. This is really great. You downplay the risk of like the terrorism and the violence, and you talk about how the privacy is going to be more important. You talk about how there's like false points, how there's like these weird comparatives. I think this is interesting. Talk about licensing agreements. So when you talk about the false points, I feel like both reply speeches could have probably benefited by taking the other side's material at its very best, right? Like saying, okay, if they're talking about terrorism and the threat here, let's just say there is like a really viable terrorist threat that's going to cause a lot of violence. What does that mean if you're that individual? Are you going to be able to stop it, first of all? If you don't stop it, is that kind of the onus of that happening on you? Is that a lot of mental pressure on you? Like, I feel like there's a lot more to be said for that probably could have been expanded on early on in the round and then brought back and weighed out in the final speeches. But I thought those two speeches were really well organized. You did a good job of themes. All of those things I think were really impressive. So great round, guys. Thanks for being in the promotional video. And yeah.
It's a really good job. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
You guys actually had a substantive round, and you got feedback, which we hope was like making something of your morning educationally. And this guy was awesome. So can I get a round of applause for this guy right here, Miles?
All right.
Okay, he did a really great job. Okay, so we'll probably send you guys a link when the thing's up on our website, but we really, really appreciate your time. You make this thing like a human endeavor. We get you guys up there thinking out loud in this weird Zoom space that is the whole world right now, at least for the next few months, we hope only. we're really happy you guys are able to do this. So thank you very much for giving up some of your Saturdays, and please keep in touch. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But
Leave the meeting.